need to rebuild our immigration system from top to bottom, starting by replacing ICE with something that reflects our morality.
I support abolishing ICE and replacing it with an agency that is more consistent with America's values.
I think that this disastrous immigration policy should be abolished.
Get rid of it, start over, reimagine it.
So for weeks, we've been hearing about the horrible practices of ICE and how they must be abolished. But now Democrats on the Hill are saying maybe that's not such a good idea because House Republican leaders wanted to test them with a vote to scrap the agency. But then Dems said that they wouldn't vote for that. Here is House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
The Democrats continue talking about removing ICE. Well, you know what? We're going to have a vote on the floor. Clay Higgins has a bill, lays out what ICE has been doing to keep our community safe and our country. It also denounces this action to eliminate and abolish ICE. So there's an opportunity. Your base may say you want to have it. You may introduce a bill to think that you support it. I want to see where people really stand on it.
They did not quite get that opportunity. Paul Ryan shelved that bill. Joining me now, Karl Rove, former President George W. Bush Deputy Chief of Staff and a Fox News contributor, and Matt Bennett, co-founder of Third Day, a grassroots progressive organization, and former Deputy Assistant to President Clinton. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Good to have you both here. You know, I mean, it comes across, Matt, as kind of disingenuous when you hear all the hollering and then there's a suggestion, well, you know, let's give it a vote. Maybe we should abolish ICE after all, and everybody runs for the fences.
Well, look, I don't think it's disingenuous at all because this was an attempt by Republicans to use this bill that was introduced along with 7,000 other bills that get introduced every session of Congress. And it clearly wasn't ready to be considered on the floor of the House. That if we're going to do something like abolish or replace an agency, it has to go through committees. There has to be real consideration about what you do to replace it. And you saw in that
So why
clip,
did the Democrats proffer an alternate bill that was one that they liked that does get rid of this agency that they say is so awful and unjust?
I mean, that's a fair question, and I think other Democrats probably will come along and do that. But this issue wasn't ripe for consideration on the House floor. And look, this kind of thing happens all the time in politics. Rick Perry called for the elimination of 3 agencies. He famously couldn't remember them all. One of them is the agency he now runs. So when people run for office, they say things like this, but that doesn't mean they're ready to be considered in Congress.
Well, they are talking now about consolidating some of those agencies, including the one that he runs. So, Karl, you know, what do you make of the politics on the side of this and what Republicans decided to do about it?
Well, look, I think the problem is not that this wasn't ripe. The Democrats thought they had a great idea, get rid of ICE. And then they figured out that that was a bad idea. Look, the idea that this needed to go through a committee process or that the governor of Texas is somehow the same as 3 members of the Democratic leadership who pro-offer this legislation or 2020 presidential candidates on the Democratic side who say we must do this is ridiculous. The Democrats got caught offering a stupid idea for a bad reason. Remember, they did this because of the administration's policy of separating minors from adults. But ICE has nothing whatsoever to do with that. Those people are interdicted at the border by Customs and Border Patrol. They're turned over to the U.S. Marshals who separate the children from the adults, and the children are then turned over to the Department of Health and Human Services to take care of. ICE is nowhere near involved in that process. What ICE is involved in is taking people in the United States who are here illegally, primarily criminals. 3/4 of the people that they removed from the country last year had criminal convictions. Nearly 16% of them have pending criminal charges in addition to that. So about 90% of the people that they removed from the country are criminals. And the idea that the Democrats were in favor of even talking about getting rid of that agency, it shows how just little thought they gave to this whole issue.
All right, here's President Trump in an interview that's going to air tonight talking about this issue and about open borders. Watch.
The Democrats want open borders, which is basically saying we want open borders, we want crime.
Why do you think they want that?
Maybe it's a political philosophy that they grew up with. Maybe they learned it at school. Maybe they're fools. I don't know.
Matt, what's your response to that?
That is the most preposterous thing I could possibly imagine him saying, and he said some really preposterous things in the last few days. Democrats don't want open borders. Not a single Democrat who in public life wants open borders. And if there are any, they should be step aside. What we're talking about is a policy that is being run by this White House that is inhumane, that is ripping children from the arms of their parents, that is deporting people who have been working here without committing a single crime for decades, that is doing stupid things, that is using the resources of the government in stupid ways. Karl's figures include people who have committed crimes like speeding. So ICE may not need to be abolished. We move around boxes on the flow chart of government all the time. INS was abolished under the Bush administration, but it does need to be changed, and most fundamentally what needs to be changed is the policy
Matt,
that they are following.
you know, lots of people watching the show right now are saying, you know, they broke the law when they crossed the border. So if they were speeding on top of that, then that's the second time that they broke the law. And you do have open borders if you're just going to let people flow across. If they can't come through the port of entry that they're supposed to come through, and then they find a softer spot to come through, they're breaking the law, and that is an open border by definition. But I guess one thing I want to ask you before I let you go is, if this was something that Democrats felt that they should connect themselves to and that they should run on, what will they be running on? What do you see as sort of, you know, the big signature message of the Democrat Party as they head into the midterms? And then I want to get Karl's response to that.
Well, I don't think it's going to be abolish ICE. I do think it's going to be stop taking children from their parents and stop acting inhumanely at the border the way that we've seen over the past few months. But more importantly, I think Democrats are going to try to focus on things that matter to virtually everyone in the United States, immigrants and citizens alike, which is providing opportunity in a moment when people are deeply anxious about the future of the economy.
The economy's pretty steaming along. Karl?
Look, I'm an advocate of immigration reform and have been for a long time, but it is amazing to me that the Democrats took this maneuver. You know, Matt is right. There are people on that list who've been speeding. 20,000 people, though, the largest number of them, are people who are convicted of a DUI. And of those people, they have a total of 60,000 criminal convictions. That is to say, every one of those individuals has, on average, 2 other crimes they've committed besides that DUI. We have 16,000 people that were removed last year who were convicted of assault, and they had a grand total of 32,000 convictions for violent acts. So the idea that somehow or another our society is going to be made safer by getting rid of ICE is just ridiculous. The Democrats realized quickly that they'd made a mistake, and they cannot bring themselves to admit that it was a mistake. They simply want to avoid it and move on. Well, maybe that's good for our country, but it shows how bad our politics is that this was treated seriously by the leadership of the Democratic Party.
Thank you, gentlemen. Great to see you both tonight.